What's up, world? This is Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. I want to welcome you back to another edition of Real Role Models in our community. And I want to especially welcome back my brother, Issa Montez. Issa, thank you for coming back and hanging out with me a little bit again.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. Appreciate it. It's always nice to talk to you.
Well, I gotta say that I've gotten some good feedback from our other episodes.
Nice.
They found kind of, you present very well. You're very professional, and it's really a kudos to you. And it kind of makes it easy on me to talk to you a little bit in this format, but also that, just your story was interesting to them and how they were kind of intrigued by our conversation. So I thought that was pretty cool. I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, great. I'm glad. I'm happy to share, and that's it's always it makes me feel joyous to hear that other people can relate and understand and enjoy our conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and last time we kind of went back and I got to talk about your family and your childhood a little bit. And I really want to get into, man, there's just a lot of stuff in there that I wanted to get into. But before we do that, you said like there was three overarching things that I kind of, when I went back and looked at it, that kind of stood out to me. And when I asked you at the end, kind of if you had some advice for the kids or whoever, the first thing you said was show up, right? And how important it is to kind of, be there and be consistent. And then another thing that kind of just stood out to me was you said, to have a good attitude and to really kind of project positive things and good outcomes and stuff like that. And then the other thing was to do your best, right? Kind of show up, have a good attitude, and then do your best, right? No matter what the
Yeah.
outcome is, if you do your best, you're going to have some kind of pride or satisfaction in that. Um, Go ahead.
No, I said exactly. I think that's if you just do those three things and present yourself that way and you keep doing, consistently doing those things, like you're not and you're gonna judge yourself a lot harsher than others will. I think that's gonna put you in a really good spot, with yourself and no one's gonna be able to tell you anything, as far as
Yeah.
like the outside world looking into what you're doing. So I think it's definitely those are the three things that I pride myself to teach my son, Rex and Noelia, showing them those things and I do it by by doing it. It's like I'm not just telling them this. I'm showing them what needs to be done and how to do it. And like I said, just do your best, do what you're here to do, and make it work. As you said it really great as far as like showing up, do your best, and have the attitude to do it. Like I feel like everybody's doing those things. As far as like the people that I'm surrounded with, the people that I surround myself with, they show up, they have a good attitude, and they try to do right by it. So.
And that's interesting because there may be something there as far as, surrounding yourself with like minded individuals or putting yourself in a positive community. And that's a whole nother thing. But I got to thinking about that and thinking about how that ties into your life because most of these things, like when we say, like, this is what I believe or this is what I live by, and stuff like that. It's because of the experiences that we've had, right? Your life experiences has reinforced these ideas, right? And so I want to kind of get into more of your life to kind of tease out why those things are valid and why those things are important. You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Cool, cool. And so we talked about your family and kind of a little bit about your growing up and where you grew up, McAllen, Texas. And really, before I want to get into that, I don't want to get ahead of myself and really assume anything. But are your folks kind of from that area, or are your folks traditionally from somewhere else and then migrated to that area, or what?
Yeah. So my mom's family migrated to McAllen, South the Rio Grande Valley. My dad's family went to the Houston area.
Okay,
So my uncles and my aunts from my dad's side, they're in Houston, and the ones my mom's side, they're in the McAllen RTV Rio Grande Valley area. So
okay.
when my dad passed away, we ended up, staying in the McAllen. You just basically my mom's support system was there. So that's where we ended up staying. So
Okay. Um, so I guess where are your folks kind of traditionally from? I guess maybe.
okay, so yeah, so North Mexico, it's
Okay.
Nuevo León. Monterrey is it's the city where we're at. So they're both our families are from there. So Monterrey is it's a big city in Mexico. So
Yeah, and it's not necessarily far from where you're at in McAllen, right there.
no,
But that's outside of kind of that Rio Grande Valley.
yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, so you're looking at McAllen. It's a border town. We're like 10 minutes from the actual, the river. Um, Border town, the city next to us is Reynosa, Tamaulipas. So that's a big city there in Mexico. It's a big border town. And then 2.5 hours south, that's where Nuevo León, Monterrey area. That's where you would probably travel like 2.5 hours in car, like by car to get there.
Yeah, to Monterey, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I see. And I looked at it on the map. I was very interested in that. Um, and so that's not really, like we said, that's not far from McAllen. Sorry, I'm dealing with this dog here. That's not far from McAllen. Did they go to that area because of the Rio Grande Valley, or was there some other industry there that brought them there, or what caused that move?
So the move actually was what happened was my dad passed away, and we were in the Houston area, Monterrey area, so that we lived in both cities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
My dad passed. My mom wanted more support system from her family. So instead of like living away from, from her family in Monterrey and Houston, she ended up like gravitating to where her sisters were at.
And
And
that's kind of in the middle then.
yeah, so it's right in the middle actually. Yeah. So Houston's maybe like 6 hours from us. Well, from
Okay.
McAllen. And 2.5 hours from Monterrey. So it's still able to go visit my grandma in Monterrey, but we still had, the support system that my mom needed, back
Yeah.
back in the
Okay.
when it first happened. So it wasn't really like an industry or any like migrated for work. I think it was more for the support system that my mom had around.
Okay. Interesting. That's interesting. Um, and so you keep saying border town, right? And so I've traveled around a little bit. And another thing, you keep saying that the southern part of Texas, and last time you said the southernmost part of Texas, and I mean you damn near talking about the tip of Texas, and the city limit of McAllen there to the south is the river. And across the river there is, like you said, Reynosa, which Reynosa is about the size of Nashville, a little bit smaller, maybe Nashville 10, 20 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, it's a big
Um,
city. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and McAllen, for folks that are in Tennessee, and kind of for a reference for me, is similar to Murfreesboro in size, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know me a little bit, and you know my pops, and I traveled around with my dad a lot and going places, and we rode around Arizona and New Mexico a little bit on some trips when I was young, and so like these border towns we saw were in the desert, you know what I mean, and just not very much to them, and almost like maybe some stereotypical John Wayne movie or something like that. And like what you're not talking about that at all. You're talking about in this Rio Grande Valley with all kind of modern agriculture and really developed cities, right?
Yeah.
And good sized cities, right?
Yeah, they're good sized cities. They're both a good sized city. Like like I said, McAllen, it's not just McAllen. It's the Rio Grande Valley is just like a bunch of little tiny cities all built together, and they're all 15, 20 minutes apart, so it's like town after town after town. And all together it's a big metro area,
Metropolitan, yeah, yeah.
we don't have a huge city that's gonna say this is the we're established here, but everything around is just built up and it's definitely a lot of economy going out there, going down there. So yeah, it
Uh,
built a lot. And honestly, like right now, like the Easter Sunday, so we have in our culture we have Pascuas is basically the same thing. They get the same spring break that we get here, and all the folks from Mexico just come up and migrate over and vacation up in the US and that area.
yeah,
So it's a big economic drive, when this time of the year when it happens. So I mean I work retail. I remember the mall being like, booming, crazy, all this
yeah.
Hispanic people coming in and just, spending their money and enjoying time here. So yeah, it's definitely like it's a typical, area where it's just border town where there's a lot of uh diversity with people coming in and through the border. So
And that international trade, right? Because like you
yeah.
talking about folks from Mexico coming and spending money and kind of doing the tourist thing in America, but Americans are do it goes back and forth in that, right? As far
Oh
as
yeah,
those
yeah, definitely.
experiences.
We have like our spring break, college kids go to South Padre Island. It's a big, big industry, during spring break. And of course, we have Bronzeville, which has Matamoros. It's a big, big southern town. Brownsville, Matamoros, it's just basically McAllen and Reynosa. Those are the two
Okay.
big cities and the two biggest, cross bridge. You just cross the bridge and you're in Mexico and you can do, you know, they have beaches, they have, bars. People go out there for a lot of dental work, a lot of medications and stuff like that. They cross the border because of, the price changing,
Sure.
situation. So.
Sure. And and part of what I was reading about that, and we're not going to get into a lot of this stuff, but that international trade, and particularly when NAFTA was passed, really provided a lot of, like you're saying, retail, economic industry, kind of a boom in that area, and it's like it was the first inland free trade zone. So there's no tariffs on the international
Yes.
goods and stuff like that to
Yeah.
drive the economy, really, right?
Yeah.
And really, as I was kind of looking at the history of the area, is to give an alternative to that agriculture industry when there may be, droughts or other kind of hits to that industry. So it's very interesting to me how all that kind of intertwined. Um, Now you talk about moving back and forth across a bridge or walking. Was this a walking bridge that I got in my mind? Did you say that, or did I just envision that?
No, yeah, there's bridges all over, almost every town, to cross over to Mexico. So from there's like Reynosa, Progreso, Mission, there's one in Bronzeville. So there's plenty of entry points where you
Yeah.
can go to Mexico and come back. So yeah, usually I mean they're big areas. They're probably like you're probably looking at 12 lanes worth of, cars coming in and out. So it's a
What's that
big.
process like? Because anytime that I've gone to Mexico, I flew in. So I went through that process. What is it like to drive across the border like that?
Okay, so there's two ways you can drive or you can actually walk through the bridge. So you can walk, there's basically just form a line, you go through the border agents and then, they ask you a few questions, you answer them, you come through. Driving is the same way. It's just like uh, think about it like going into a theme park and there's like a bunch of entryways. You just pick one, you go through there. There's a main border patrol agent, and they'll ask you a few questions. Sometimes they're like, hey, they're a little fishy. They put you to secondary, so you go and just you park. They probably look through your car, and they let you go. They let you go through. So it really
Yeah.
depends on what it is. But it's just basically that think about a theme park and you're just driving, pick a lane, you just go up to the gate, answer some questions, and you can go through.
And what do you have to have? You have to have your ID. Do you have to have? I guess you have to have a real ID now, or do
So
you have to have a passport as well?
so to go to you got to have passport or your real ID. Um, Most people take their social security card, birth certificate. So, something to show that you're legally allowed to come into the US. So
Okay. Okay. Um, and so your family, y'all made that crossing all the time between Monterey and Houston and McAllen and all and everything in between, right?
yes, yeah. Yes.
So go ahead.
So even there's another checkpoint too. There's like it's called Farfurias is maybe like I want to say maybe like 60 miles north from that border. There's another checkpoint where you have to go through Border Patrol again, and ICE agents are there too as well to make sure that you're allowed to keep going north. So there's that main river bridge, and then later on, if you're going to Houston, if you're going to Corpus or San Antonio, you do have to cross another checkpoint to keep going forward. So.
Okay, is that space before that other checkpoint? Is that kind of that maybe that free trade zone or
I'm not sure what legally like what the legality on that part is, but I just know there's a second checkpoint if you want to go further north.
okay, okay, all right, all right. So, and another thing, and I don't know how much you might know about it, but this is just from my readings, and I want to know if this is like maybe propaganda or just sensational kind of journalism. But what's the deal? So there was maybe it's not been recent, but there was some movement of like the cartels in the area. Do you ever hear anything about that, or like what is that like in that area? Is that something that's on the news, like, or whatever?
Yeah, so
Then that's something like when I was reading it, this incident was like 15, 20 years ago that I happened to be looking at. And like, you know what I mean? It's not a recent thing, but was that a thing or?
there's always been like some kind of like cartel presence in that area. It's a border town.
Sure.
There's a lot of movement, guns coming from the US to Mexico, money coming from the US to Mexico, and then the other way around, drugs coming up. So um just to tell you a little story, like it's probably been like 15, 10 years 2008. So it's been a while. But I used to work in Laredo, so Laredo's around 2.5, 3 hours um, east of McAllen, and 83 is just all it just parallel to the river. So we're just going parallel to the river 2.5 hours, and I had it was like a 2005 Saturn, one of those cool, like small little cars. And I'm not kidding you, man. Every time I was driving to Laredo from McAllen or from Laredo back home, I would get stopped by the Border Patrol because
Mm,
they were actively searching for drugs and illegal trafficking and human trafficking and all that stuff. It's
yeah.
constantly happening. It's an ongoing situation. So it's definitely serious. Uh, if you're not involved in any of those things, you don't have anything to fear. You don't have anything to be worried about. Like I told you, man, I got stopped. I'm telling you, countless of times by border patrol, pulled over, and they were like, "Man, put a sticker on that car." It's like, these guys use small vehicles like this because they can dump them. If they
Yeah.
decide they get caught or whatever, they dump them. They just run away. They go into the bushes and they try to get away from us. They were like, man, do something to identify, like make it more unique. I was like, man, I'm poor, dude. I can't put tint on this thing. So, so,
That's funny, and that makes sense. And another thing is like I think a lot of the ideas that people get about those situations comes from maybe these more fantasy type portrayals, what we see on the movies or on the TV shows, and not, what I'm saying, necessarily how the thing, how life exists in those areas and stuff like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um, so back to McAllen, it's a pretty good sized city. What were the neighborhoods like? I mean, I assume that there, was kind of a mix of socio demographic populations and stuff like that. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So I mean, honestly, when I think back, I mean, I never saw anything like that, because I was always out and about. I walked home, and from like elementary to middle school and a few years in high school, it was always like walking there, walking back, going to like my sports, like soccer and basketball and all those things. I was always busy and I never like had the opportunity to be like, hey, this is what's going on here and there. Now thinking back, there's definitely a variety of like, demographics as far as like economics. So we had, there's really rich areas and there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money in McAllen, and there's some old money, there's like new money, there's like it's like everywhere, honestly. And I lived in an area where everybody was just medium income, so um and there was never I never saw like a drastic, difference. But I mean, I was a kid, so I wasn't looking into it as much, but there's definitely some money down there.
Yeah, and that certainly backs up with kind of what I had read about it, and like you said, some old money. I mean, what I was kind of reading as the whole reason that it's kind of on the map is some rich guy donated some land to the railroad when it was coming through in the 1850s, and that's kind of what made the
That's pretty
community. Um, and then it seemed like there was a lot of variety, like you say, in that retail aspect, and really it seems like there was maybe an explosion of that, kind of starting in the 80s and into the 90s,
yeah.
and um, so I'm interested in all that. Um, you were talking about your kind of early work in the retail and seeing all the tourists. Was it like a typical like a mall type situation, or what was the big draw? Like, was it gallery type vibe? Where's the place that
Yeah.
people go for that?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, there was only maybe two, three malls, the big malls in the area. So Brownsville, Harlingen, McAllen, they all had like a nice, huge mall. And McAllen actually is just like booming. It's just amazing. So I started working in retail at a shoe store, and I could just see like how much like traffic it came from Mexico. It was every weekend constantly, and holidays it was just like flooded with internationals coming down, spending their money. So the mall, it's a high end mall in McAllen. So you get all these big retail stores, and you have like, the basic mall area, and then you have this big brands. So there's definitely a lot of that. So there's definitely big, like, retail wise, it's a big economy there in McAllen.
Has there did you know of? Because I know the mall thing was like a huge trend in the 90s, it
Yeah.
seemed like, right? And the city that I grew up had a mall, and the bigger cities around, they all had their own mall and stuff like that. And like a lot of these malls now are kind of struggling, with people going to online shopping, and then the pandemic happened and all this stuff. Has there been any impact in that you've seen down there, or is it still kind of booming, as far as development and even in that retail industry type vibe?
Okay, so I haven't been in retail for a long time, but Heather works for a retail company, and I always kept tabs on that store because that's where I first started. I mean, we met at Journey. You know our story, so maybe I can just tell you a little bit. We met at Journeys. That's where I first started working retail at Journeys, and I always like ask her like, what's going on with the Journeys in McAllen? Like what's going on. So, and apparently they're like number one store in the country. They just like increased over increased over increased. Like this guy's like the manager there is just like doing amazing every year after year after year.
Okay.
So he actually won an award, best store in the company. So just keeping tabs on that as far as like, because of where I started,
Yeah.
uh, it shows that there's still a lot of boom in the retail world, especially there. I
Yeah.
know a lot of cities everywhere, a lot of people are struggling with having a brick and mortar store because online is so much easier. But I think in that area it's still definitely booming.
That's cool. That's cool. Um, that's interesting. And so I guess I wonder, just in our contemporary environment, as far as with the current presidential administration, their attitude with this whole ICE and immigration thing, has that affected that area's tourism and retail economy at all that you might know or even be aware of?
So I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure there's some kind of like effect of what's happening with the temperature on this closing border and all these different, ice showing up and taking some people back home. So I think I figure there's some kind of impact. There's none that I'm aware of. I know there's like a lot of presence of ice in that area, so I'm pretty sure there's got to be some kind of impact there.
Makes things difficult at the very least, I'd say. Um,
Yeah,
for sure. And I would assume, kind of like you're saying, that there would have to be some economic impact behind that, and
yeah.
that'd be interesting to find out more about. Um, well, so I don't want to rush our conversation, um, but I feel like we're in a little bit of a transition. You kind of giving me this scene of McAllen. I want to know something else.
Yeah.
So with McAllen and you growing up playing soccer, what is soccer like in South Texas? I mean, kind of like what football is like in Tennessee and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
tell me what the environment and the culture is of soccer in South Texas.
All right. So you mentioned football here and soccer, so it's up to par with the
Yeah,
same mentality that we have here and what they have down there for soccer. Don't get me wrong, football is a big part of our school system, and high school football is always like, Friday Night Lights, it's always
right.
the thing, right? But soccer is definitely like a big impact. And then not so much in the school system, but on the rec leagues and
Yeah, like the
the
travel
club leagues
teams.
and the club leagues. Yeah. So
Yeah,
we had like a bunch of clubs that were, basically fighting for players every year. You had tryouts, you had invites, you had all kinds of, everyone wanted a piece of that, good player, a good team, and I wanted to be part of it. So it's definitely big. It's not, like I said, not much in the school system, but in the club areas and rec leagues.
now, is there any international play?
Yes, yeah. We had
Okay, talk to me about that and how that kind of goes down.
So there's a lot of tournaments. So we have our league, our club league. So we had all the Valley. We played against San Antonio teams, Houston teams. Sometimes we went up to all the way to Dallas. So we have tournaments within those areas, and then we had an international tournament. So sometimes it was host in McAllen, sometimes it was host in Reynosa, but it was always like actual club teams from Mexico that were like foreigners for their professional teams, bringing their players up here and playing against us. And then when we went out there, we were playing against them in their home turf. So it was definitely intense, and there, there's some.
What was that talent level like?
Oh, I mean,
Oh, hell to the no, he's not coming in my
yeah.
room.
So we had our teams were I feel like we were top level. We four of our players made the ODP for Texas. So we were up there, and whenever we went to the Mexico, and then they had their teams that could actually bring more players into, from their farms.
Yeah.
Uh, Sometimes we didn't stand a chance. It
Oh
was
yeah.
it was it was rough. There was a couple times that we went to a tournament and we're like, what are we even doing here? So
Yeah.
there's levels to everything. I mean, we played together for years and years and years, and we developed together, and we were state champs 3 times, you know,
That's cool.
in our division. So, we had a good team, and there was 2 tournaments that we went down there that we were just like, I don't know if we were just off, we got intimidated, or what happened, but we didn't perform at all, and we were just like, we can I on my end, I was like, man, I don't we don't belong here, So, but everywhere else, we played and it was great. Even when they came to the McAllen tournament, we were more competitive. We actually did win one of those tournaments, and we were at, always podium, when we were the host. But when we went down there, it's a little bit different. Soccer is
So
definitely intense, and
yeah.
it, it's I mean it was amazing playing that back then when I was playing soccer. So
Yeah, and so I do a little bit of assuming, I guess, and it really ought not, I reckon. But when talking about your family and you growing up in McAllen, and obviously you come from what? So would you say you come from a Hispanic heritage, or would you say Mexican? I got some homeboys that like, yes, they are Mexican, but if you get to talking to them, they're going to tell you that they're an indigenous tribe, right? And that's how they kind of identify themselves and really identify their family. You know what I'm saying? So I don't, and my ignorance causes me from not knowing how to ask that, I guess, in an appropriate
yeah.
way. You know what I'm saying? So how do y'all kind of identify maybe your cultural heritage or like that idea of ethnic heritage, maybe?
Yes, so I feel like we're Mexican. So we're definitely Mexican. Our culture is definitely built on all the Mexican traditions. So we were able to assimilate really fast, really easy, especially because my aunts were already here established. We came to when we went to McAllen, and we were there with my mom and all that stuff. So we already celebrated all the U.S. holidays like Thanksgiving, 4th of July, all those different, major US holidays. We were part of those, so we were able to simulate, but at the same time, we kept all our traditional things that, came from Mexico. So my mom is still we build on top of that. So I think we're definitely like a mixture of all those things, and we are actually, I feel like we're Mexican, but we with a lot of US pride, so
Yeah, 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 yeah. I
yeah.
dig that. I just know, and it's different for different people. Like I got buddies that are real high on like being Irish and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And like, I don't really know what I joke around and tell people I'm just an American mutt, and so I definitely understand what you mean as far as like I certainly identify as like an American versus a British or an Irish or anything like that, which I may have a little bit of all that in me. I really don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and so and you said before, kind of, you said now Mexican culture, and you also said before like Hispanic, right?
Yeah.
And so what that causes me to believe, right? Were y'all speaking 2 languages at home, or was it primarily Spanish, and then you had the English, or what? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Okay, so Hispanic and Mexican culture, I feel like I don't see any, like in my eyes, I don't see a difference. You know what
Okay.
I mean? So those words to me are interchangeable. You
Okay.
know, like Hispanic, Mexican. I think for me in my head, it's basically the same thing.
Right.
So as far as like the how we grew up, it was between us, brothers and sisters, Spanish, and then and as we grew older, it transitioned into some English and then like English and Spanish. So my mom is it's fluent in English, but she gets embarrassed for her accent, about her accent. So she won't speak it. So she understands, she can write it, she can read it, she can do whatever, like she can do everything, but she will not speak Spanish because of her accent. My
I understand
yeah.
that because I can read and write Spanish very well, but the gravy in my
Yeah.
mouth prevents me.
Yeah.
So I try not to speak it because of
Yeah.
my accent. So I completely understand that.
Yeah, so with my mom, we grew up like speaking Spanish 100% of the time. Me and my brother started like speaking English to each other, and it just developed into just having that relationship. I have one sister that I communicate with her in Spanish, and we transition Spanish and English in the conversation constantly, and we understand each other. And there's one sister that likes to speak Spanish, and we just like, that's our main language that we speak. So it really depends, honestly, like how it is. Like one of my sisters is like we're her household is like Spanish only, where they're like speaking Spanish. She's like, her mentality was like, I want you guys to understand and learn the Spanish language, because like when you're at school, all you're gonna hear, all your friends, everybody's gonna be speaking English. Everybody, you guys gonna learn that. It's gonna happen. It's part of our curriculum. It's gonna develop. But
Right.
naturally, in the household, she wanted to like build that Spanish like foundation. And for in my instance, now I'm away from the valley. I'm not in a border town. I don't have a lot of friends that we speak Spanish, or my son doesn't have any like friends that speak Spanish. So it's harder for me to like try to continue that the same kind of culture she's building in her household. For me, it's like with my son, it's a lot of English back and forth. He does ask me like, "Can you teach me how to speak Spanish?" And I'm just like, "Man, I wish I could." Like it's a really hard language to teach. I can tell you all these words, I can tell you what they mean, but I cannot. I understand all the concepts behind Spanish. I just cannot teach you those things.
The
So
verbs, right? All the different what is the conjugations, right? That's the word that they're
yeah,
using. You know what I mean? All that stuff. And I've struggled with that part of it my whole life. And then also there's such a diversity of the use of the language. And so you were talking about like what, and you kind of answered one of the questions I wanted to get to as far as what Hispanic means to you. And you talk about it being interchangeable with Mexican, right? And so to me, like it's like Hispanic and Latino, right? And these words are used a lot, right? And from my understanding, and this doesn't, this is just how I look at it, is from it's all about it. It kind of describes the colonizer, right? The Hispanics are the folks that speak Spanish, right? Other countries like Brazil is an easy example, right? They were colonized by Portugal, so they speak Portuguese, right?
yeah.
But that is still a Latin language, right? You know what I mean? And so that's just kind of how I guess, describe those things in my own head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. So now that you say that, like you would say like, hey, so what do you consider yourself more like Hispanic, Spanish, or Mexican? So I think I would still say like a little bit of all, because
Yeah,
we have that Hispanic culture. We do speak Spanish. We have that, that instilled in us, and we're still it's just like all together, like mixed in. So
yeah. Something
um
like a melting pot or
yeah, no, it's
something,
still, yeah. I
right?
mean, we're all like built into together. It's not
Yeah,
just one area or one region. It's all together. So, like my sister did one of those DNA tests, and we are like I think the last time she checked was like 72% Northern Native Mexican. And that, so it's that Mexican, the North
Yeah,
Mexico, South Texas, that area, that's where our DNA ancestry comes from. So that's where we're built, that's where we're at. So
yeah,
we're technically like, Native Americans, part of that northern South Texas,
right. Yeah,
area.
100%.
So we're definitely in those roots from there. Like this, we're built from there, we've been there, and I think like well, my family's still there. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
blue blooded of that type of tradition. Yeah, for sure. That's really cool, man. And I know so there's so much more I want to ask you, and there's a lot of stuff I want to get into stuff that you've already said and how it ties back to our conversation before. But I kind of want to just take a break right here with this so that we can kind of keep this consumable and reconvene later on.
yeah, yeah, for sure, definitely appreciate it.
Man, I really appreciate this, bro. Like I said, I've gotten a lot of good feedback, but I'm just really interested in this stuff. And it has a lot to do with my dad and my parents and those trips that we took all over. Like I have a great interest in people and culture and like for us to know each other the way we do. Enables me to kind of dig into you and dig into those aspects a little bit further. I just really
Yeah.
appreciate that, bro.
Hey, yeah, anytime, man. We'll definitely pick it up again and we'll do it again.
Yes, sir. All right, this is been Real Role Models in the Community, Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. Peace and love.